and that people say is progressive, or somehow they are not centrist, that we got to become centrist. And by centrist, what people seem to mean nowadays is that everybody needs to move over toward that far right. And they have done that deliberately. That was part of a political process called moving the Overton window, to make us think that it's normal for there to be masked thugs in the streets throwing people into unmarked vans. That's not normal. That's radical, and that's far right.
That's fascism. And that is the great American historian Heather Cox Richardson, who is rightfully annoyed right now because so many people are confusing progressives with communists. Hi, my name is Suri Crowe, and you're watching the MeidasTouch Network. I am annoyed that people don't understand the difference between socialism, communism, and fascism. That's my pitch for a much stronger public education system in America, which the Trump regime is dismantling as I speak. Anyway, America, at least before the Trump regime took control, was generally considered a liberal democracy, meaning we operate with capitalism and private ownership at the center of our economy, and the people elect their representatives. I quibble with the term democracy because of the Electoral College, which is not democratic at all and needs to be abolished. But for now, and for the sake of the argument for this video, we'll just leave it as America previous to the Trump regime, liberal democracy. Communists don't believe in private ownership of anything. True socialists don't either, but for different reasons.
And the laws apply to everybody, and we live under the rule of law, and you can always change your leaders if you don't like them, and so on. That is not the case in the political systems under communism or under fascism, where both of them tend to go toward authoritarianism. That's not what's happening in the United States at all. And if I see somebody talking about democratic socialists in the United States as the left, my hair's going to catch on fire, because you notice I didn't talk about socialism in those three divisions. Socialism is adjacent to communism, and it too calls for the people to own the means of production. And the distinction between socialism and communism doesn't really matter in this context, although they are different things. But in both of them, they don't want private property. They want the government to own stuff for the good of the people.
China, North Korea, Laos, Vietnam, and Cuba are all communist governments. Socialist democracies, those countries include Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, my grandmother's home country, as well as Germany. And they have private enterprise. They have, fantastic innovation, but they also have socialist-run institutions to protect the greater good of all of the people.
A great example of that is a country like Denmark. And Denmark has high taxes for sure. It also has state-sponsored education, and it has healthcare, and it has a social safety net, and it has crackerjack innovation as well. It has private companies. It has all of those things. It simply has those basics of human life covered.
Fascists believe a small group of people, the elite, for example, in Israel, that would be white Jews, an ethno-state. In America, that would be white Christian nationalists under Trump, should control the majority of the things, and they will use the government to do it. Like I said, as in the case with Trump, who is now taken control of the government for his own personal use and that of his cronies. Fascists don't believe the people outside of that elite group should have any power. Back to Heather.
But those who are in power look at that, and they look at somebody like Zohran Mamdani in New York City, or I'm going to talk to you about some other people too, and they say, oh, they're communists. They're not communists. And they say they're not communists. They do not want the people to own the means of production. What they are saying is something that is deeply embedded in U.S. history all the way back to the very beginning. And what people like Zohran Mamdani, who calls himself a democratic socialist, is saying, and what some of the other groups I'm going to talk about in a minute are saying, is that in order to have a liberal democracy, the government must make sure the playing field is level enough that the rich people don't walk off with everything.
US used to operate much more like a socialist democracy. Under FDR, he was a prime example of that. He struck the New Deal, a series of economic, social, and political reforms in response to the Great Depression. He implemented Social Security. He tried to add Medicare, but got political pushback. Then, thanks to Presidents Truman and LBJ, we added Medicare and Medicaid. Those are social programs. The U.S. military is a social program, the most expensive social program on earth, one that I would argue is overblown, massively bloated, and we need to take billions and billions of dollars from the U.S. military socialist program and remove it and reallocate it to programs like Medicare, Medicaid, to SNAP, to so many other things, as well as develop a universal healthcare program for Americans, because we are the only country in the Western world that doesn't have that. Every other Western nation has universal healthcare, Medicare for all. We're the only one that doesn't. It's bizarre and crazy. And we've been brainwashed into thinking that that's wrong and bad. It's nuts. What's weird and crazy is that we don't have it. And after last week's Democratic Socialist sweep in New York City, MAGA Republicans, who are actually fascists by definition, Republicans now are anti-democratic. They are not pro-democracy. And a group of moderate Democrats flipped their wigs. A group of these Dems signed a promise to America pledging to uphold capitalism because late stage capitalism is working so well for us right now. And here's New York Congressman Tom Suozzi, who spearheaded the campaign.
You know, there's certain things that I believe in that are not being reflected in the current environment, especially with some of these races on Tuesday. And as we said in our pledge, you know, we're for capitalism, not socialism. We're for safety, not lawlessness. We're proud of America, not ashamed of America. And we need to be promoting those things. And, you know, the far left and the far right, you know, they're all very well organized. But those of us that don't support those far left or far right principles need to do a better job organizing and getting our message out.
Okay, he says safety over lawlessness, LOL. Under Mayor Mamdani, New York City is seeing a record drop in violent crime numbers in all of New York City history. You feel me? He's teaching a master class in how to make government work on a budget without hurting and taxing the working class. And he's so organized, he's done all of this and more in less than 6 months. So, Mr. Suozzi, I think he's got it figured out. And I think you could take a few lessons from him. Mamdani is making these moderate Dems who are collecting millions of dollars from the pro-Israel lobby look bad, because what have they done lately for their constituents?
Is this like a unique moment in New York, or is this the beginning of a national movement?
I think we are seeing a hunger that is not just felt by New Yorkers, but frankly by Americans from coast to coast for a new kind of politics, one that puts working people at the heart of it. And I think for far too long, what we as a party have been able to say to New Yorkers who are struggling is simply to explain why they're struggling, not actually offer them a vision for how to make life better. And these candidates, Brad, Daria Lisa, Claire, they ran campaigns that spoke to working people and that said life in the nation's most expensive city need not be this way any longer. And I can't wait to have them as partners in DC in that work. But I do think, as you said, it's not just New York City where working people are asking themselves, why can't I afford my rent? Why can't I afford my groceries? Why can't I find enough money in my pocket for childcare, no matter how hard I work? And I'm so excited that these incredible soon-to-be Congress members will be helping to lead the fight across the country on making sure that working people are right there where they should be, which is the heart of the conversation.
The reaction from Democrats has been something. You've had some prominent Democrats dismissive of what happened here. I mean, you had Senator Blumenthal say the effort to nationalize New York is going to fail. What happened in New York will be really irrelevant by the time of the elections in November. Hakeem Jeffries basically said the same thing, saying that this is not indicative of what needs to happen in November. What do you make of that?
You know, I think that when you ask Americans what they're feeling in this moment, amidst reports of an economy that's strengthening, of a stock market that's booming, you will hear an exhaustion at having to try and make ends meet every single day, every single week, every single month, and that it's getting harder and harder. And so a message of fighting for working people, we don't have to nationalize that message. That is a national message. It's a national crisis.
The man simply does not miss. What strikes me is that this group of pro-Israel moderate Democrats, Republicans, is coming harder for Mamdani, for AOC, for Graham Plattner, for Abdul al-Sayed, and other progressives for pushing to help the working class, for taxing billionaires, for demanding a stop to a U.S.-funded genocide, and for demanding Medicare for all than they are for the literal fascists who are holding our nation hostage, and for the corrupt regime that is stealing billions of dollars from us. It is truly something.
At least in the city of New York, voters are just really ready for a Democratic Party that stands for something and has a very strong agenda to make our lives easier, to tackle corruption, to lower costs, to make healthcare a right for every American, to raise wages, to make unionizing easier in the workplace. And they want to make a forceful statement in how badly they want to see us fight for that. And I think that in any robust year for Democrats, I believe you're going to see an expansion of a party and a deepening of our commitment. And so I actually think that these results are a very good sign for November. To your point, when I was elected in 2018, an election like mine, where voters were willing to really, trade in someone that was supposed to be the presumptive next Speaker of the House, in my predecessor, and trade that in for also a Democratic socialist, a new organizer at that time. I think that is actually an indicator of places in other parts of the country willing to elect Democrats, even if the politics are not the same, even if those communities don't align with those with those same exact agendas. They are willing to take a chance for a better future.
Yeah, the voters on the left want a party of fighters, not corporate shills who are bending the knee to the corporate donors. And establishment Dems have become way too cozy with the corporate class instead of remembering who sent them to Congress. Check out this hilarious takedown from comedian Steve Tapas.
I want to make out with Jeff Bezos right now. It is over. Capitalism wins. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, James Carville. There are 13 Democrats that wrote a letter committed to fighting socialism. Hashtag Promise to America 2026. That is brat. It's done. Have you seen the strongly worded letters they've written to the Trump administration? Done. I'm a capitalist now. I became a real estate developer. I bought $1,000 worth of websites in the last month. All of them have names like promisetoamerica.com, .net, .org. And I just did Promise to America 25 times because I knew I couldn't afford to make it come up first on Google. So what I knew and what we found out is that if you just buy 25 different combinations of the same website name, that'll make the SEO go up. And since I'm a capitalist, I want to make sure I protect the Chuck Schumer wing of the party, the Peter Thiel wing of the party. I want to make sure that the corporate Democrats know we have their back and that we want to make sure that our tax dollars are going overseas to harm innocent people instead of going into services that would help innocent people at home, like Medicare for all. No one wants that. So on Monday, tomorrow, we're going to be revealing all of our domains. And we got Slockin for president, Shapiro for president. I don't want to ruin it. There's over 150 domains. Come through. On Tuesday, we are going to do the ultimate capitalist thing. We are going to auction off those domain names. Have to take money from a super PAC in order to buy it.
Now, whether you label yourself an independent, which is a growing majority of American voters at 45% of voters, according to Gallup, a Democrat, a progressive, a working party, families, or Democratic socialist voter, it is not a radical idea to want universal health care, a living wage, when the minimum wage hasn't changed in the United States since 2009. Yet we have more billionaires who have 10x'd their wealth in the last week and people who are living in their cars in the wealthiest country in the world. People living in their cars when Bezos and Zuckerberg and Thiel and all these other folks have 10x'd by billions, like in 72 hours, and people can't afford rent or housing. It is not a fringe idea to want affordable housing in a planet that isn't on fire and dying because of fossil fuels from big oil that is polluting and literally killing everything on this earth, including us.
That we know is that the Republican Party's brand is fear. And they have to constantly churn what they want people to be afraid of. To be afraid of socialists, to be afraid of immigrants, to be afraid of women, to be afraid of... They constantly want Americans in fear of somebody. Because if you are not afraid of someone who is your neighbor, you're going to realize who's actually pickpocketing you. And that is the large corporations that are engaged in profiteering and jacking up your prices for no good reason. It's going to be in this administration that is engaged in record levels of swindling, thefts, tariffs, your housing. And so this is kind of their new thing of the day. But I think that people are feared out. I think that everyone's nerves are shot in constantly being taught and told of what country, person, community to be afraid of. And they just want a solution. They want their groceries to be more affordable. They want to figure out how we're going to get health care. They want our housing to get under control. And I think that we're ready for an affirmative vision.
If we cannot deliver for working people, then what is this for? I'm not interested in writing a manifesto or frankly in reading one. I'm interested in delivering, and that's exactly what we've been showing.
But they're saying that if you're a socialist, you're not a Democrat. I mean, is there room in the party for both of these views?
Yes, here I am. Here are so many more. And I think what makes our party a beautiful party is the fact that it's a big tent, that we have
But you've also said it has to be a party with a spine, with a backbone.
Yes,
so
even a tent has to stay up.
Yes, so, does it have to stand firmly for these ideas that you're talking about that others are calling dangerous?
I think it has to stand for working people. And I think it has to be willing to fight for working people. And I think that there are some who are offended by the prospect of a party that knows who it fights for and goes every day to work for that. Because what we've seen over many years is a willingness to not only explain away the status quo, but frankly, even to look to benefit from the status quo. And that's not what working people are looking for from our party.
I would say that is a man who is quite comfortable with being the poster child for the Democratic Party because he's a man who is getting the results he promised his people. We've become way too used to being disappointed and let down by our elected representatives who are like, well, we can't get this done. It's impossible. Incrementalism. Remember, they work for us, not the other way around. And this November, we have the opportunity to remove the ones who are not doing the job. All right? That's what we have in front of us this November, to remove the corruption, to hold to account the criminal enterprise that is running the American government right now in the Trump regime. We have that power. We have it. The resistance is building, and I am feeling more confident by the day that we are going to win, but it's going to take all of us, and we cannot quit. So stay fierce, my friends. And as always, peace.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.